I never imagined that the sterile glow of fluorescent lights and the relentless hum of office machines could hide such a profound betrayal. My name is Lucas, and for years I had trusted Serafina, my wife, believing that our bond was as steadfast as the company we both served. But beneath the veneer of daily routines and shared ambitions, a secret had taken root. A secret that would shatter the very foundation of my world. It began with the smallest of anomalies. I noticed that Serafina's phone, once a mere tool for work-related communication, now vibrated incessantly with messages at odd hours. At first, I dismissed it as the bustle of a high-pressure corporate environment. Yet, over time, I observed subtle changes. The way her smile would fade as she glanced toward the office corridor, the hushed tone in which she mentioned late meetings, and the furtive glances exchanged over her shoulder. Each of these moments, inconspicuous on their own, slowly coalesced into an image of deception that I could no longer ignore. One fateful afternoon, while I was buried in a mountain of reports in my corner office, I accidentally stumbled upon a forwarded email on Serafina's work account. The subject line read, "Project Synergy. Let's meet later." And inside, amidst a flurry of technical jargon, were hints of a rendezvous that extended far beyond the realms of professional collaboration. The sender's signature simply read Dorian. His name, unusual yet memorable, resonated like a foreboding echo in my mind. I couldn't help but feel that I was peering through a keyhole into a clandestine world where my wife had chosen another path. As days turned into restless nights, I began piecing together fragments of evidence. I reviewed timestamps, subtle cues in meeting schedules, and even the way her laughter, once gentle and reassuring, now carried a tint of excitement when she was near her cubicle or during team gatherings. Each discovery was like a shard of glass in my heart, a tangible reminder of the betrayal that was unfolding right under my nose. The corporate corridors, with their relentless pace and unyielding demands, had become the stage for a secret affair, a liaison nurtured behind closed conference rooms and quiet corners of the office cafeteria. The ultimate blow came one chilly evening after a long day of back-to-back meetings. I found Serafina in a rarely used conference room, her figure illuminated by the soft glow of a single desk lamp. There, seated across from her was Dorian, engaged in what appeared to be an intimate conversation. Their body language was charged with an unmistakable chemistry that transcended any professional courtesy. I stood frozen in the doorway, my mind struggling to reconcile the woman I loved with the one now entwined in the arms of another. That night, the sterile silence of our suburban home was replaced by a cacophony of conflicting emotions. I spent hours pacing the living room, grappling with disbelief, seething anger, and a sorrow so deep it seemed to consume every corner of my being. I questioned every shared moment from our past, the late-night talks, the plans for the future, the unwavering promises of loyalty. How had I been so blind? How had a life we built together been so effortlessly undermined by the allure of corporate ambition and forbidden desire? In the days that followed, the confrontation was as inevitable as it was heartbreaking. I sat Serafina down in the quiet of our study, a space that once resonated with the gentle hum of our shared dreams. With a voice that trembled between accusation and sorrow, I laid bare the evidence of her betrayal. Her eyes, usually so warm and inviting, flickered with a mixture of regret and an undeniable thrill, a spark that hinted at the excitement of a world I had never been part of. In a measured tone, she confessed that the relentless pressures of the corporate world had slowly eroded her sense of self. Dorian, with his unconventional charm and audacious ideas, had become an escape from a routine that felt increasingly suffocating. She admitted that, in the sterile confines of the office, she had found not only passion but also a sense of empowerment, a feeling that had long been absent from our marriage. Her words, laced with a mix of remorse and defiance, left me reeling. The betrayal was not just an act of infidelity, but a profound fracture in the trust that had once been the cornerstone of our life together. In the aftermath of that fateful conversation, I retreated into a period of profound introspection. The familiar walls of our home, once a sanctuary of love and shared purpose, now felt cold and alien. I took to wandering the city streets after dark, the rhythmic pulse of the urban night offering a stark contrast to the silence within me. Each step on rain-slicked sidewalks was a reminder of the fragility of trust and the unpredictability of the human heart. I began to document my thoughts in a worn journal, every word a step toward understanding the man I was now forced to become. Therapy and the solace of a few steadfast friends gradually helped me piece together the shattered remnants of my identity. I learned that betrayal, as devastating as it was, could also be the catalyst for rediscovery. The office corridors that had once been the backdrop of my despair eventually transformed into symbols of resilience, a reminder that even in the wake of heartbreak, one could rebuild and redefine one's life. Now, as I stand on the precipice of a future that is as uncertain as it is full of possibility, I acknowledge that the wounds of this betrayal will always be a part of me. Yet, I also recognize that every scar is a testament to survival, a marker of a journey from shattered illusions to the dawn of a new beginning. The corporate deception that once tore through our marriage has, paradoxically, opened the door to a deeper understanding of my own strength. And while the pain of Serafina's infidelity still echoes in the quiet moments of the night, I now choose to look forward with cautious optimism, a determination to forge a future defined not by the betrayals of the past, but by the promise of renewal and the unyielding power of the human spirit. The days after the confrontation blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights and endless reflections. I retreated into the sterile corridors of our once familiar office building and the quiet solitude of my own thoughts, where every fluorescent flicker seemed to punctuate the harsh reality of betrayal. The evidence of Serafina's secret liaisons with Dorian had left a permanent scar, and I found myself endlessly replaying that fateful moment when I had witnessed their intimacy in the secluded conference room. The images of her tentative smile and Dorian's confident charm, once dismissed as mere professional banter, now haunted my every waking thought. In the aftermath, my routine was shattered. I arrived at work with a heavy heart, navigating a labyrinth of cubicles and hushed conversations that felt laden with unspoken judgment. Colleagues who once greeted me with warm smiles now offered only sympathetic nods or avoided my gaze altogether. I became a silent observer of the corporate world that had once given me purpose, a world now transformed into a constant reminder of how swiftly trust could crumble. Every time my phone buzzed with an alert or an email pinged with urgency, I braced myself against the possibility of another painful reminder of what I had lost. During lunch breaks, I found solace in the quiet corners of the office cafeteria, my gaze fixed on the passing figures outside the window. I began meticulously documenting my thoughts in a leather-bound journal, a habit I had abandoned in busier times. With each entry, I attempted to sift through the tangled web of hurt and confusion. I wrote about the subtle cues I had once overlooked, the lingering glances Serafina shared with Dorian, the soft chuckle in her voice during late-night emails, and the way her demeanor had shifted ever so slightly as our company grew more ambitious. These entries were not just a record of betrayal. They became a mirror reflecting my own vulnerabilities and the hidden fissures within my identity. I also sought refuge in unexpected conversations. My friend Octavian, a fellow executive with an uncanny ability to see through corporate facades, reached out after noticing my desolation. Over quiet, impromptu meetings at a modest downtown cafe, he listened to my confessions without judgment. Sometimes, he said with a measured calm, the things that hurt us most are the catalysts for the deepest transformations. His words resonated long after our meetings, gradually nudging me toward a reluctant acceptance that, while the pain was real, it might also be a necessary passage toward rediscovery. In the silence of my apartment on long evenings, I turned to art as a means of catharsis. I began exploring the local galleries in search of solace among canvases that told stories of loss and rebirth. One rainy night, as I wandered through an exhibit showcasing urban landscapes, each painting echoing the stark contrasts of light and shadow, I recognized that my own story was unfolding in similar hues. The slick, rain-drenched streets and the interplay of neon against darkness seemed to mirror my internal struggle, a collision of despair with the faint promise of renewal. Therapy sessions soon became an indispensable part of my journey. My counselor, a perceptive woman named Celestine, helped me confront not only the bitterness of Serafina's betrayal, but also the silent complicity I felt for not noticing the early warning signs. In our sessions, we unpacked the layers of our shared history, the personal sacrifices made in the name of corporate ambition, and the subtle erosion of intimacy that had crept in unnoticed. Through her guidance, I began to understand that healing was not a linear process but a mosaic of moments, each one a small victory over the crushing weight of regret. Gradually, I started to reclaim fragments of myself that had been buried beneath the fallout. I resumed the practice of early morning runs along rain-soaked sidewalks, where the rhythmic pounding of my footsteps provided a steady counterpoint to the chaos of my thoughts. I even reconnected with my passion for photography, capturing the raw, unedited moments of life that revealed beauty in imperfection. With each snapshot, I felt a tentative sense of liberation, as if I were piecing together a new identity from the shattered remnants of my old self. Yet, even as I embarked on this path of self-reclamation, the specter of betrayal lingered. Every time a familiar ringtone echoed through the quiet office or a stray comment in a meeting hinted at shared secrets, I was transported back to that painful confrontation. But over time, the acute sting began to dull, replaced by a profound awareness of my own resilience. I learned that while the betrayal had irrevocably altered the course of my life, it did not define me. Now, as I sit in the dim glow of my study, journal open and pen in hand, I am beginning to see the possibility of a future reshaped by authenticity and inner strength. The corporate betrayal that once felt like the end of my world is slowly revealing itself as a crucible for transformation. Every scar, every memory of that fateful meeting with Serafina and Dorian, is now a reminder of the complex interplay between trust, ambition, and the relentless search for personal truth. In the quiet aftermath, I find that healing is emerging not as a denial of the past, but as an acceptance of its lessons, a stepping stone to forging a future defined by resilience, self-awareness, and the unyielding promise of renewal. The weight of silence in our home had grown unbearable, and after days of relentless introspection, I knew that I could no longer bury the truth. I, Lucas, had spent countless sleepless hours poring over messages and memories, trying to decipher how the woman I loved, Serafina, had allowed herself to be drawn into a clandestine liaison with Dorian, the charming yet audacious colleague from work. The evidence was irrefutable, and every detail etched itself into my mind. The late-night emails, the hushed tones in shared corridors, and that one fateful afternoon when I glimpsed them together in the secluded conference room. That evening, with the office lights long dimmed and the remnants of our shared dreams scattered like fallen paper in the quiet of our study, I finally confronted her. The room felt charged with a tension that rivaled the hum of the city outside our window. I sat across from Serafina at our worn mahogany table, a space that once had hosted laughter and future plans, and steeled myself for the conversation that would change everything. Serafina, I began, my voice low yet steady, I need to understand what happened. I've seen the messages, the check-ins, the photos. You can't hide behind corporate jargon anymore. I deserve the truth. For a long, agonizing moment, the only sound was the distant tick of a clock on the wall. Her eyes, usually so warm and reassuring, betrayed a storm of conflicted emotions: regret, guilt, and a hint of defiance. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, she admitted, "Lucas, I never meant to hurt you. The pressures at work, the endless routines, they made me feel invisible. Dorian offered me something different, a spark of excitement in a place where I'd felt trapped." Every word struck me like a blow. The betrayal was not merely about infidelity. It was the unraveling of a connection I had once believed unbreakable. As she spoke, I recalled the many times I had dismissed her fleeting laughter at the water cooler or the subtle shift in her tone during late meetings. Now, those moments coalesced into a painful mosaic of deception. I pressed on. "How could you let this happen, Serafina? How did our home, which I thought was built on trust and mutual respect, become a backdrop for a secret that I wasn't even aware of?" Her eyes filled with tears as she tried to explain. I felt suffocated. Lucas. Every day, the pressure to be perfect, to conform to the corporate grind, left me empty. With Dorian, I wasn't just another employee. I felt seen, appreciated. It wasn't about love, at least not the love we once knew. It was about feeling alive for a moment. Hearing those words, I felt an array of emotions surge within me. Anger for the deception, sorrow for the loss of the woman I thought I knew, and a deep, gnawing disappointment that our shared years had led to this void. The betrayal was no longer confined to whispered conversations in sterile hallways. It had invaded every corner of my life. I could no longer ignore the shattered trust or the future we had planned, now reduced to fragments scattered on the floor of our study. In that charged silence, I struggled to find my voice. I trusted you, Serafina. Every promise, every late-night conversation where I thought we were planning a future together, it all meant something. How do I reconcile the woman I loved with the one who craved a taste of something new in the boardroom? I need to know if any of that was ever real. Her response was a trembling mix of regret and resignation. I'm sorry, Lucas. I wish I could say I never meant for you to be hurt. But I was lost. The allure of something different, the excitement. It drowned out my sense of duty, of our promises. For a long while, we sat there in mutual despair. I felt as though the very ground beneath us had crumbled, leaving nothing but raw, exposed wounds. The pain of her admission mingled with the lingering echoes of happier times. A reminder that love, once pure, can sometimes fracture under the strain of unmet needs and the seductive lure of novelty. That night, I left our study feeling both devastated and strangely resolute. I wandered through the quiet halls of our home, every familiar object now a relic of a past I could no longer reclaim. The confrontation had not provided all the answers. In fact, it only deepened the questions about identity, desire, and the subtle dynamics that allowed betrayal to take root. Yet, it also marked a turning point, a moment when I realized that clinging to a shattered dream would only lead to further self-destruction. In the ensuing days, I sought refuge in solitude. I revisited the evidence, each email, each timestamp, each clandestine meeting note, and allowed myself to fully feel the spectrum of emotions. The anger that burned like a wildfire, the sorrow that seeped into every thought, and a cautious determination to understand not just what had happened, but why. I began documenting everything in a new journal, a raw and unfiltered chronicle of my inner turmoil and gradual path towards self-discovery. Conversations with a few trusted colleagues, and even late-night calls with my friend Octavian, helped me see that betrayal, as painful as it was, might also be a catalyst for transformation. Octavian's quiet wisdom, that sometimes the deepest wounds can clear the way for a more honest version of oneself, resonated with me. It wasn't that I had wanted this to happen, but now I faced a crossroads. To wallow in despair or to harness this pain as fuel for a rebirth. As I sit here now, the echo of that painful confrontation still lingers, a constant reminder of the fragility of trust and the unpredictability of human desire. I know that the journey ahead will be long and riddled with the remnants of what we once shared, but I also see the potential for renewal. I am beginning to understand that while the scars of Serafina's betrayal will remain, they do not have to define the entirety of my future. Instead, they can serve as a solemn testimony to the complexity of love and the resilience required to rebuild one's life after everything has been torn apart. The confrontation has left me with more questions than answers, but it has also ignited a quiet resolve to rediscover who I am, beyond the illusions of a broken trust. And as I take tentative steps into this uncertain future, I carry with me the painful lessons of today, determined to find clarity and strength in the wreckage of yesterday. In the weeks following that fateful confrontation, the echoes of betrayal still reverberated through every sterile corridor of my mind. Yet even as I grappled with the shattered remnants of trust, I slowly began to recognize that this crucible of corporate deceit, this fracture in my once unshakable world, was also a catalyst for rebirth. The revelation of Serafina's clandestine meetings with Dorian had not only unmasked a painful truth about our marriage, but had also forced me to confront my own vulnerabilities, ambitions, and the ways in which I had allowed myself to be defined by our shared past. At first, the days blurred into one another as I navigated the aftermath in a haze of sorrow and simmering anger. Every time I passed the glass-walled conference rooms or caught a glimpse of my reflection in the polished office elevators, I was reminded of the moments I had silently endured, those subtle signals I had once dismissed, like the furtive glances exchanged between Serafina and Dorian, or the way her laughter seemed to shift in tone during late afternoon meetings. With every memory, the sting of betrayal was undeniable. Yet, with time, the raw intensity of that pain began to transform into something else. A quiet resolve to rebuild, not just my career, but the very core of my identity. I turned inward, seeking refuge in the disciplined routine of self-reflection. Mornings that had once begun with the anxiety of uncertain emails were now greeted by solitary runs through rain-washed streets and long moments of stillness at dawn. The crisp air and steady rhythm of my footsteps became a meditation, a deliberate shedding of old hurts and the slow, painful embrace of a new self. I revisited my old journal, the one where I had recorded ambitions and dreams before the corporate world began to blur them into endless spreadsheets and strategy meetings. Now, in its weathered pages, I began to rewrite my narrative. Not as the betrayed husband, but as a man capable of emerging stronger from even the deepest wounds. My therapy sessions with Celestine, a counselor whose keen insights cut through the fog of bitterness, became another cornerstone of this transformation. In our conversations, I learned that healing was not about forgetting the past or erasing the evidence of deception. It was about accepting it, understanding it, and then using that understanding as a foundation to rebuild. Celestine taught me that while Serafina's choices had left scars, those scars were markers of a journey I could choose to redefine. I learned to view the office corridors that had once felt like battlegrounds as simply parts of a larger landscape, one that I now had the power to navigate on my own terms. Gradually, I began to reclaim my space within both the company and my personal life. I immersed myself in projects that had once ignited my passion for innovation, leveraging my skills and creativity to spearhead initiatives that restored my sense of purpose. In the process, I discovered a new circle of colleagues, people who valued transparency and resilience, who had themselves weathered personal and professional storms. Their support was a quiet reassurance that, despite the betrayal, I was not alone in the struggle to reclaim authenticity in a world driven by ambition and hidden agendas. Evenings transformed from solitary vigils of introspection into opportunities for gentle reconnection. I attended local art exhibits, where raw depictions of urban life and moments of vulnerability on canvas mirrored the transformation taking root within me. At a small gallery opening one crisp autumn night, I found that the interplay of light and shadow in the artwork resonated with my inner journey, a reminder that beauty often emerges from contrasts, from the interplay of pain and hope. In time, the bitterness began to yield to a cautious optimism. I learned to see the betrayal for what it was, a devastating fracture in a relationship that once held promise, yet also a painful lesson in the impermanence of trust. Each day, I allowed myself to grieve not only the loss of what we had shared, but also the illusions that had blinded me to the subtle signs of discontent. I embraced the idea that the end of one chapter did not necessitate the end of my story. Instead, it was an invitation to reconstruct my life with greater clarity, a life defined not by the shadows of corporate deception, but by the vibrant hues of resilience, introspection, and newfound self-respect. Now, as I stand at the threshold of an uncertain yet hopeful future, I am determined to move forward with a heart tempered by both sorrow and strength. The pain of Serafina's betrayal, though indelibly etched into my memory, has become a stepping stone, a lesson in the value of honesty, self-worth, and the relentless pursuit of a life that honors the truth, however bitter it may be. The corporate corridors and boardroom betrayals that once threatened to define me now serve as a reminder that even in the most sterile environments, human hearts are capable of remarkable transformation. And so, with each new day, I choose to embrace the promise of renewal, forging ahead into a future where every scar is a testament to my ability to rise, rebuild, and ultimately, to rediscover the man I was always meant to be. The days following the confrontation blurred into a mosaic of raw emotions and quiet determination. In the aftermath of Serafina's confession, her secret liaison with Dorian, a charismatic force in our corporate world, I found myself at a crossroads. The evidence of their betrayal, once a source of searing pain, had gradually revealed a deeper truth about the fragility of trust and the impermanence of the familiar. As I sat alone in the dim light of our study, the echoes of whispered promises and stolen moments reverberated in every corner. I realized that my identity had long been entwined with the stability I believed our life represented. Now that stability was shattered, leaving me with nothing but the raw materials of introspection and the painful need to rebuild. In the silent hours of early morning, I took long walks through the rain-soaked streets of the city, each step a measured beat against the relentless pulse of my grief. The familiar hum of the urban night, punctuated by distant car horns and murmurs of midnight conversations, slowly began to offer a strange comfort. The betrayal had cut deep, but with every step, I felt the possibility of transformation stirring within me. I recalled the days before the deception, a time filled with shared ambitions, quiet dinners discussing future plans, and the unspoken bond of mutual respect. Now that bond had been irreparably broken by ambition and desire. Yet, in its place, I sensed an opportunity, the chance to redefine myself beyond the roles I had so long played. Therapy sessions with Celestine, a counselor with an unerring ability to unravel the complexities of the human heart, became a cornerstone of my healing. She guided me gently through the labyrinth of anger, sorrow, and eventual acceptance. Every scar, she told me, tells a story not just of pain, but also of survival. Your journey is far from over. It is simply evolving. Her words resonated deeply as I began to see that my worth was not diminished by Serafina's betrayal, but rather could be recast in the crucible of renewal. Gradually, I reconnected with passions that had lain dormant. I returned to early morning runs and rekindled my love for photography, a creative pursuit that captured the interplay of light and shadow, mirroring the contrasts within my own life. Each photograph, each captured moment, was a step toward reclaiming a sense of identity that was independent of the past. Conversations with trusted friends, like Octavian, lent a steady perspective. They reminded me that even in the wake of corporate treachery and personal heartbreak, there remained a reservoir of strength waiting to be tapped. Now, as I stand on the threshold of a future that is as uncertain as it is promising, I no longer allow the pain of betrayal to define me. Instead, I choose to honor the lessons it taught me about vulnerability, resilience, and the impermanence of trust. The corridors of our corporate world, once stained by hidden agendas and covert rendezvous, now serve as a backdrop to a new narrative, one where I am the architect of my own destiny. Though the scars of Serafina's infidelity with Dorian may forever mark this chapter of my life, they also shine as reminders of my capacity to rise, rebuild, and ultimately, rediscover the strength within. In embracing this painful truth, I step forward with cautious optimism, ready to forge a future defined not by betrayal, but by the unyielding promise of renewal and the relentless pursuit of authenticity. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed this journey, please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories like this one. Got thoughts or experiences you'd like to share? Drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.